Hello everyone, my name is AriesFaries and today we'll be doing a video on why you should play a character in VTubing. But perhaps not in the way you might expect. This video uses pre-existing concepts from LARP, also known as live action roleplay, and acting in approaching VTubing that I feel protects and puts you in a good mental space for streams. Okay, a bit of an overview on what's happening. For some context, this was originally a very good question I was asked at a panel. So I hope I can do a video to finally do that question justice on what I do. At the end of the day as well, this is just my opinion. So if it helps you, yay, okay. If not, alternative perspectives can exist. So I hope this was at least fun for you to see. The other thing as well is that this is taking existing concepts in other spaces and how they kind of deal with, playing character and how they apply to VTubing. Not exactly a one-to-one, but I feel there are some very good things that we can learn from these other areas. And at the end of the day, these will be touching from my own personal experience from LARPing and filmmaking and talking to actors. So basically, as a brief overview, some of this won't just make any sense, but we will discuss them, is basically building your character, character bleed, mental health, and boundaries are villain lines. But we'll get into that more detail later. Okay, so key terms is kayfabe, which is borrowed from the professional wrestling. This refers to the act of staying in character and treating the persona as real, especially during streams. Why is this relevant? Maybe as a VTuber you're playing character. Right? We're also going to make a differentiation here between the operator, which is the person behind the VTuber, as well as the persona, which is the personality or character that the streamer adopts, which may be different or similar from their real life self. So, next one. Now, this is the stuff that's going to stretch your brain a little bit. There is a concept in LARPing called character bleed. Why is this relevant? We're going to get to it, but we're going to go step by step into this. Character bleed is the phenomena where emotions, thoughts, or kind of physical sensations blur between the player and their character in role-playing games. Once again, more so LARPing, live action roleplay, or role-playing games would be your D&D, right, is where this concept comes from, when it originates from. It happens when a player takes on a character's feelings, and we get something called bleed out, or projects their own emotions into the character, bleed in. So this psychological crossover can be positive, increasing immersion, or negative, causing personal distress. So why is this relevant? Well, one could be saying that VTubing play characters, and I do feel there is a crossover in similar experiences. Okay, so basically, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but if there's a VTuber, there is probably a self or operator behind the scenes running that character. But for the purpose of a stream, right, we're kind of in this magic circle, we can kind of say, yes, this pink cat girl is 100% running the best, most successful bakery and very cool, and we 100% trust in the pink cat girl that is very real. The character of Aries, right? And this kind of, suspended belief can create some immersion, right? We are happily talking to the pink cat girl, right? How bleeding works, as just an example, let's say the operator had a really, really bad day. I don't know, like it was super rainy and maybe the traffic was really bad and on the way back and the operator got really upset. Then maybe that could bleed into the stream because you can just tell more than usual, maybe the character, the VTuber, is more frustrated or on edge. Example of bleed out is basically, let's say your VTuber, I don't know, they successfully got a goal. I don't know, like 1,000 followers reached or something, and they feel over the moon, right? And super happy. A good example of bleed out could be that the operator's just really chuffed for the whole next day. I mean, they're not in character streaming, they just feel great. They just feel like, wow. I was like, it's very nice. But that's kind of this idea of kind of like bleed in and bleed out. Something happens outside, right? And you feel that, and it comes in, and something happens in character, and you take that outside. It's just kind of this crossover from that, right? So, character bleed continued LARPing. So basically, the way it works is that it is like a seesaw, right? Characters can be played close to home or far from home. So, the best way of describing it is that playing characters far from home is like where you play a character very different to your, like, the operator's normal personality, right? And I guess in a way, far from home lets you explore aspects of yourself you might not have experienced in real life, right? For example, maybe you're an introvert and, now that you feel like you're behind a VTuber model and you're super excited, you can try being that loud, talkative, chatty, bouncy person you always wanted to be, or something like that. Or maybe you're super loud and you're like, I want to play like a chill, quiet, person, right? So you can explore with these characters. But please note that it tends to be that playing a character different to your to kind of yourself, like the operator, is harder to maintain for long periods, right? On the other side, right, playing a character close to home tends to be more easy because things come naturally. However, you risk a stronger character bleed. So we're going to do some story time. As someone who has attempted to play a character very far from home, I wanted to play a super logical, like direct, short character, right? As part of my LARPs. But what I found is that if you have that for 8 hours and you are not that, I am bubbly, I like to be nice to people, it gets kind of hard. It's hard playing a more direct, almost mean character, right? And that's probably just it, where I could definitely say by the halfway mark, I'm like, I'm going to have to adjust this. I cannot maintain this in acting like character, right? It was very, very tiring. So going the other way, basically character bleed, how I felt that in a game was that there was a character that died in a game, it had been a long campaign, and you know what? Played a character very close to home, also someone who's lost somebody, and I can't help but just say it's a bit silly, it's a game, but hey, I felt that, okay? It was like, oh, you lost someone, it's like, whew, right? And having those emotions a little bit out, well, you just kind of think, it's sad that the character died in game, right? You shouldn't be, it's just a game at the end of the day, but you acknowledge the feelings that you are feeling, right? Based on kind of that, I don't know, it's the best way I can describe it. But that's the thing, at the end of the day, it's like, that's a good example of bleed out, right? As things happen, right? So I guess the best way of saying is that kind of knowing this relationship between kind of how like playing character affects your mental psyche, I kind of had this knowledge of how it kind of like going in and out, that makes sense, going into VTubing. So I think I was very lucky in that. That being said, I don't think this is covered very much in like the VTubing space, and I feel we are kind of thrown into the wolves where it's like, hey, you want to be a VTuber? Go start streaming. And this whole idea of like the character Aries versus the operator behind Aries, or any VTuber for that matter, there's kind of this distinguished line that we have, right? So I guess as we go to the second thing, most of the VTubers, I will actually say, will start playing close to home, right? Which means, and I feel we're just now playing like, at a higher risk of character bleed, right? If you don't understand those concepts, things can get messy, right? And I will say this, yes, I play close to home. Aries, I will always say as well that I am playing a character, but that character is imbued with traits the operator has. So it's easy to maintain that for like a long time if you got a 6-hour stream, right? That being said, it is important to note that VTubing also doesn't come with the same safeguards that LARPing and acting do, right? So thus, knowing that we will tend to play close to home, because I'll give you some stars. If you can play a separate character very far from home and maintain that for an 8-hour stream, you have got amazing acting skills and probably are able to distinguish very easily between them. But my feeling is that, yeah, most people tend to not be amazing actors. and yeah, there are no safeguards. That's why you can get a lot of kind of bleed in and bleed out. And I actually think, having that distinguish between yourself, the operator, and the VTuber persona is actually really important. And here is why, right? Something I thought was really interesting from acting. I was always not the actor. I was always the person behind set. But basically, I was talking, and you might ask, well, why would you just not play a character? Why can't you just play yourself, right? And story time is that, basically there was a very sad scene in the movie that was being made where like this character's, I think, family member had a car crash or something, and the character was very sad. And I actually asked the lady, like, so when you're acting, do you actually like think of really sad things to act, or do you just like act? Like, I just was curious. And the actor was very, very, very kind in explaining, but she said that from her training, it was always better for her to be able to act sad than actually like mentally work herself up to being sad. Because the best way she could say it is that, imagine trying to shoot this scene 30 times. I have to work up distressing thoughts 30 times into my head, and that can't be good for you in the long run. So how this all loops back around into VTubing is that I think this kind of acting approach is whether you are proactive and in control, or reactive and not in control. Because obviously if she's thinking actual like very traumatic, distressing thoughts, you could ask the question is like, how much are you in control now? Like, it's hard for her to check in with herself. So I feel this concept kind of applies with VTubing in that by distinguishing yourself from the character, you've basically got the option, not that it always works, but, a bit of a light switch to kind of check in yourself. Are you in or out? How you going? And I feel this kind of helps as well with your professionalism going into the space. So I'm just going to cover a few LARPing safeguards, and this will kind of give you an idea on kind of how other spaces kind of treat this concept, and then how I think badly it's done in VTubing. There's no nice way to say it, right? I guess because I'm lucky coming from that, I kind of am aware of these different things as I feel things, because I've all had it before. But I feel, just having the self-awareness to kind of keep yourself in check is really, really vital in VTubing. So playing a character, and this is a character close to home, at least for Aries, gives you a more detached perspective, right? So I think kind of you can even just ask yourself, is the character feeling this, or am I feeling this? And it kind of helps you work through, kind of segment your emotions and self-awareness. So I'm not going to lie, when I was LARPing, you get super invested. The time flies, right? And you're going really hard. But even kind of, I'll give you an example. We have a thing in LARP where it's always it doesn't matter, what context, but basically in-game, if someone mentions something in-game about drinking water, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to drink water, right? Because it's very easy to kind of lose yourself in that emotion and just, not take care of yourself, right? And I think Twitch kind of has the same thing. When we have the hydrate redeem, that's actually a way to kind of check out a character and into operator and be like, hey, operator, have you drank some water? You are going for a whatever hour stream. Are you okay? Have you drank your water, right? Are you okay, right? Same thing in LARPing, which I feel is done really well, is that very early on in a game, often they ask for your lines and vels. Now, obviously, this depends on the LARP you're playing. Definitely Vampire the Masquerade does this really well because we are dealing with dark concepts, right? Vampire the Masquerade is a LARP where you're all not so very nice vampires. So, and a lot of things happen, right? So I think having those kind of lines and vels and boundaries kind of helps with the storyteller and kind of knowing what to not trigger. But this applies, I feel, to VTubing, is that, you need to ask yourself kind of beforehand, what things are you okay not? And I'll actually go further to say that in LARPing, we are very accepting if something triggers and you actually got to redefine that. I'll give an example. There was someone who, I think vels means that it can be alluded to, like a fade to black. Well, lines means we don't cross it. I hope I got that right. But there was someone who veled saying that it's okay if I guess dolls are there, right? And it should be fine, right? Just don't have them in the main space. It can be kind of off to the side. But after doing the kind of LARP I like to call it live action set kind of thing, right? They felt that it was too much for them. They actually felt really, really having all these horror dolls and there was just nope, right? And they actually put that as a line. And the storyteller respects that, say, we just won't have any physical dolls in the place, right? At all. So that's okay. And I think that's the same thing with VTubing, right? We can have our boundaries, and as things trigger, we can redefine them. And I think kind of having this thing that it's okay to do that, and we're all kind of also learning about ourselves in this process is, something that I think needs to be discussed, right? So what we can learn, right? Unfortunately, since there's not really someone else to do so, you gotta ask yourself constantly if the operator, yourself, is all right. Have you eaten? Have you slept? Have you made time for your friends? At the end of the day, chat can help you, e.g. the hydrate redeem, but it's not always a fail-safe option. And I will actually say that while LARP tends to be kind of a community base and multiple people talking, interacting, and checking on each other, VTubing is isolating. At the end of the day, this whole anonymity thing means that in VTubing, your friends might not even know you do VTubing. Or maybe you just, because you're always streaming, obviously it's more of a solo venture, right? You don't have those in-person interactions where someone in LARP can literally just pull you aside and go, are you okay? There's we have hand signals in LARPing that was to say if you're out of game or in game, if you just genuinely just wanted to check in with somebody, right? And going back, with lines of vels. I mentioned this previously, but sometimes things don't know if you trigger it, right? But I think the takeaway of this, right, is that, take notes of these things, reflect, right? And that's something that's really, really important with, I feel, LARPing that is not as discussed, I feel, in VTubing. Basically, VTubing has emotional, relationship, and identity bleed, right? Emotional. If you obviously get upset, you can it's bleed in and out. You can get emotional. Relationships, oh, you hear that all the time. If two VTubers get very friendly on screen, is it just the VTuber personas being very friendly? Are the operators also super friendly, right? Maybe it's them acting for each other, or maybe it is something happening, right? It's that bleed now. And the other one is identity bleed. I personally always say Aries is a character, so it is that suspended belief. But I also feel like, you know, it's so much easier as well, like when you differentiate it, to set your boundaries, set your rules, set everything up beforehand, then kind of just mush everything together and figure it out backwards. That's always been like kind of what I feel. And then other thing is that in LARPing, we kind of have a debrief and after games. So sometimes it's like, it's all about the reflection, like asking yourself before and after stream, right? Decompression, once again, really good thing. Take time after your streaming sessions, okay? This is what we do in LARPing, right? 2, socialize, disengage from your character, and return to reality, okay? Just, you know, is the you gotta ask yourself, you know, if you're doing like 12-hour streams, is it really healthy now? I'm sure the VTuber persona's having a great time with games, but how's the operator going? You know? And I think that's it, is that it's important for yourself outside your VTuber persona, right? I think full-time VTubers are at a higher risk of not being able to decompress. So just take care of yourself. That's the biggest thing, right? The other one is that that's used in kind of LARPing to distinguish kind of those lines is like talking about the character in third person. So in LARP, when you're at a game, refer to your character as a third person with friends. So I apply this to my VTuber persona. If I'm talking to people outside streaming, it's like, you can see this happening even in stream sometimes, like as I'm like switching in and out, right? Aries does this and this and this. It's this notice to me to distinguish between like where I'm sitting as I'm kind of piloting things. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? And I just think it helps distinguish between yourself and the persona. Makes it easy, right? We're on show. This is Aries now, doing Aries' thing, and then it's like the operator is doing the operating things. But Aries is closely imbued with the operator, but still, right? This kind of goes into the next one, where I feel it's kind of the cart before the horse situation, but it kind of helps character creation. I feel a lot of people going into this would have already had streamed, and now it's kind of going backwards, so this is why. But if you have not streamed at all and now you're starting it, you've started at the right place with character creation. At the end of the day, character creation is about setting your rules for yourself as your streaming persona that is different to the operator, right? Once again, I'm going to go back to Vampire the Masquerade. It's a LARP that I played, right? We call them in Vampire the Masquerade, the Vampire LARP, convictions and chronicle tenets. In summary, all that is basically, these are just like laws for the character they can't break. They could align with you. They could be totally different, but it kind of also helps set the character apart from yourself, right? Or kind of really defines it on your, like kind of your, what your character is. And why this helps is that I just think it helps you consolidate your VTuber branding or persona, right? Now, I'm not going to give you all of mine. Right? It caused too many crises that people are like, no, Aries, everything was a lie. One thing is that Aries, the persona, does not swear. But, you know, the operator could. I would say the operator doesn't swear anyways on a regular basis, but the operator definitely could, but Aries cannot swear. If Aries is swearing, that must be some bleed in or something for Aries to do that. It means I've lost control, right? And we no longer, and we acknowledge that, I guess, that self-awareness as an own boundary line for myself, the operator, and Aries. I know it's weird because the cat girl's speaking in two people, but on having that. So I think, you know, kind of having your own rule sets of your quote-unquote character can also kind of help distinguish between, create a few more extra layers of separation that can kind of help switch in and switch out. So, now that we've totally stretched your brain, you're probably just like, I just don't know what just happened. It's okay, because we have a summary. We have a summary. At the end of the day, really, the crux of everything that just happened is that when we say playing a character, it's not like I'm going to play like a totally different, like a king or something, like something totally different that is like so far removed from me that is playing a character. No, in LARPing terms, you know, playing character can actually literally kind of be very close to yourself, but there are dangers to it, and being self-aware about that, as well as increasing your self-awareness, will just help you in the long run, right? And I hope all that previously kind of explains it, right? And concepts specifically, and it's been coined character bleed from LARPing or role-playing games, kind of also explores in-depth the mental space of playing character in safe ways. And unfortunately, we do lose a lot of the safeguards in VTubing that we had in Larping. So that's why we're kind of, having to, I guess, be even more careful of kind of these spaces that we're kind of entering, right? The other one is that, hey, I'm not the expert. There's some full-on papers about character bleed and how this affects people. I recommend you can have a good look at that and come to yourself and kind of what you think about it, right? And that's always the best way to get wiser, right? See other resources. And I think at the end of the day, the whole point of playing character is just to take care of yourself, right? If you just create a mental distinction between you, the operator, and the persona, I feel it just lets you disconnect and switch off, right? I think it can be very easy to just kind of, get in the grind, as they like to say, and then be like, oh, I'm gonna, put all my time into this, right? But just step back, having this distinction and being able to ask yourself, are you okay? And I think that, these things can also result in burnout, right? Not feeling happy with things, of how they're progressing. A good example is if you're not happy with your VTuber stuff, right? Is the character Aries unhappy, or are you unhappy? You got to ask yourselves your questions, check in with yourself and make sure that you're doing okay, right? That was fun. Thank you for watching a very long, fun one about, I don't even know. I guess playing character. Why you should play character. This is kind of how I go into playing character, given all my experience. I hope that it kind of gives you an insight into how I think you should pilot things. That being said, there's multiple ways of doing things. And I hope it just, it works out better for you. It will very much help me if you subscribe to my YouTube or follow me on Twitch. So I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time for another video, and I'll see you around. Bye.